The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Revolution.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It's August. It is August 4th, Tuesday. Welcome to the program. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share. This podcast have quite a few headlines to get through today. 31 headlines for you today. Thanks for joining me today. Top of the news this morning, Iran deal is on the table. Markets soar. Oil prices dip. And also, socialists rise as Democrats sink. We're going to talk about that and what's going on in Wisconsin. Apparently, there's another autonomous zone in Madison, Wisconsin. The Democrats are using this, or the left, I should say, are using it as another wedge issue to try to get their unruly and chaotic socialists into power. Because apparently cops are fascists or Nazis or all this other nonsense. They don't uphold the law or enforce the law or defend the taxpayer. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about Wisconsin's sewer socialism, a little socialism history that went on in Wisconsin. We're going to talk briefly about that and some other things going on in the news. So without any further ado, let's read the news. We're going to start with the New York Post. Iran, Oman near deal to reopen Strait of Hormuz with both countries collecting service fee. New York Times says an emergent deal could cement Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. The deal would address President Trump's most urgent political problem by allowing ships to move again. There are ships moving, but it would also give Iran strategic leverage it did not have before the war, and that's what the left is stressing. They're not going to be able to charge tolls for the Strait of Hormuz. That's not the point. The point is, in any fashion, arriving at some sort of peace deal. What the New York Times and a lot of people are just glossing over is that Iran has not, since the constant bombardment and because of the blockade, which has brought Iran to the table, and Iran is not firing missiles, which is the most important part. There are two parts to this problem: getting Iran to stop their aggression and obviously arrive at a deal that would surrender their nuclear ambitions, which they pretty much agreed to. But there's more to the story. First, back to the New York Times story. Iranian officials say that while there will be no tolls charged, well, I thought that's what they said, the agreement includes a service fee to cover the environmental impact of shipping, security for the cargo ships and tankers, and staffing, whatever that means. Revenue would be divided equally between Iran and Oman. That's what the Iranians say. But a U.S. official familiar with the negotiation said on Monday that Iranian account was not accurate and said that any temporary routes established through the strait would not involve approvals or permissions by Iran and would involve no tolls. So the Iranians are talking out of both sides of their mouth, but the New York Times is also, and they constantly do this, they say one thing in the headline and then they have to admit in the story that what they're saying isn't completely accurate. But let's get to the good part before we get to Trump's characterization of what's happening there. Zero hedge, oil slides as Qatar floats new Iran deal. Bessent promises Hormuz breakthrough. We may have a deal tomorrow. Another fake ceasefire in progress, they say? Or are we to believe it's for real this time? There's nothing on ground level at all that currently suggests that warring sides are imminently about to agree to a new ceasefire or so much as back at the negotiating table. Well, we'll see. And yet, Tuesday morning headlines are now being driven by Qatari foreign minister statements saying that the language for a possible U.S.-Iran resolution has been drafted and is being circulated between parties. Of course it is. Iran can't sustain the blockade. Pure and simple. Iran is not firing missiles currently. The most important thing is Iran firing missiles at commercial shipping here in Egypt or whatever. That's the point. Now, we could see the price of Brent crude here, or excuse me, WTI crude, which is different. I checked oil prices today, and the Brent crude dipped just a little bit while the WTI crude dipped precipitously. The point is, we're looking at a deal, whether it's suggested, as I said yesterday during a propaganda update, when you're at war, and especially what Trump has always done, is he uses the media to affect markets. I mean, everybody knows that happens, so why wouldn't you do that? Of course you would. If you want oil prices to go down, because oil prices will affect you politically, of course you could come out and make a statement. But the point is Iran isn't firing at shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, most neophytes out there might say, oh, well, there's no shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz. That's not true. Ships are still using the Omanian route, and some ships are passing. You could look at the tracker and you could look at the news, and it says just that very thing. What we have to understand is that there's some shipping going through, but it's not being fired at. Now, the Omanian route hugs the coast of Oman, and they usually switch off their transponders and do it under the cover of darkness, just as a precaution. But we haven't had any Iranian missile shot at commercial shipping, and that's the only card they have to play. People keep talking about mines. There's no evidence that there are mines in the Strait of Hormuz. No ship has struck a mine. Like the Iranians were mining the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq war, and there were ships hitting mines. I mean, that happened. It's not happening now. So let's not get our panties in a bunch, or keep our panties from bunching. And then the Washington Times has the headline, Trump touts incoming peace deal with Iran even as Tehran signals defiance. Of course they do. National Review, go figure, it turns out the Iranian regime is unbelievable duplicitous. Unbelievably duplicitous, excuse me. One American News, Iran leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. Trump pushes back on claims of no ongoing peace talks. Well, what is duplicitous? Basically, that means you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying one thing while doing another. Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous, says Trump. They're asking for a meeting. Some would say beg. Talks begin with more scheduled in the immediate future, and they say openly and proudly that they're not having any discussions, that nothing is being talked about, and they're only dealing with Oman, the U.S. president said. Whether Iran wants to admit it or not, we are, in fact, talking of a resolution to the problem that they have caused for decades. It is very simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, he continued. That's the point. Whether Iran is talking to Oman, Oman is not bombing Iran. Oman does not have a naval blockade of the Persian Gulf, blockading Iranian shipping. That's just not the case. So what we know is that Iran doesn't want to directly talk with the U.S. Whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is Iran agrees to abandon their nuclear program, and the only card they have to play is affect commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf. And if they keep doing that, the attacks will continue. What is that pirate saying? The beatings will continue until morale improves. Fox News, story number 7, why Trump is downplaying reports Russia and China are helping Iran. The president dismissed Iran's allegations as very unimpactful. The president dismissed Ukraine's allegations as very unimpactful, even as officials acknowledge Moscow's role. Okay, here are two things. So if you don't know what this story is, President Donald Trump cast doubt in recent days on allegations that Russia is helping Iran target U.S. forces. They are, even as members of its own administration acknowledge Moscow and Beijing are supporting Tehran in other ways. They're using satellite imagery from both those countries, just as Ukraine is using the satellite imagery to target Russians. Trump dismissed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's claim that Russia supplied Iran with satellite imagery of U.S. military installations in the Gulf, saying any assistance would have been very unimpactful given the damage inflicted on Iran's military. In the outcome of the war, the tit-for-tat war, maybe it would be considered unimpactful. I don't think the families of those killed, the American service people killed, would say it's unimpactful. It is impactful. The point is, going back to my theory, is that the whole war started because China was going to ship advanced anti-ship missiles to Iran to prevent this very attack, these very strikes from happening, because if they received the long-range anti-ship missiles, they could keep the carrier groups at bay, which would mean you'd have to use land-based or further put off American battle groups, probably into the Red Sea or what have you, which would make the striking of Iran a lot more difficult. Now they don't need, compared to where the carrier groups are now, they don't need to refuel the fighter jets. They just fly into Iran, hit their targets, and fly back to the ships. If they had to be pushed out into the Red Sea, etc., they may need refueling. That is problematic, knowingly how Iranian missiles were striking the refueling ships, planes that were based in Saudi Arabia, etc., Jordan, etc. Just getting back to the story briefly, to finish up here with this Fox News article, allegations that, if borne out, would suggest America's two chief geopolitical rivals are quietly supporting a nation at war with the U.S. Members of his own administration have acknowledged broader help from Moscow and Beijing. There was definitely adversary alignment, Hegseth said. Russia and China were at different levels enabling some of the things Iran is doing. Of course, mostly with satellite imagery. I don't know. The thing with China is shipping in anti-ship missiles, and now that report of shoulder-filed MPADs, the shoulder-filed anti-aircraft missiles, is troubling if true. But then again, people are questioning Reuters' report because Reuters was the only one who reported on this, and what the purpose of that was, where their source was it Iran? You know, because if Iran was putting that propaganda out, it might try to keep the American aircraft at bay by saying this, because one of the most successful shoot downs happened from a shoulder-fired missile in Iraq, from Iraq. Iranian proxies in Iraq. Article number 8 from Just the News. U.S. military says it has redirected 44 vessels in naval blockade against Iran. This is the most successful part of the interdiction. The interdiction is the most successful part of the operation. CENTCOM resumed its naval blockade against Iran last month, which aims to halt all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports. The naval first blockaded Iran earlier this year from April 13th to June 18th at the height of the conflict that began in February. It really should have began in February. CENTCOM has redirected in the latest blockade CENTCOM has redirected 44 commercial vessels, disabled 2 and boarded 2. In the most recent blockade, they were, I think, 6 vessels disabled during the first part of the blockade, when immediately when they started the first blockade on April 13th, ships tried to ram the blockade and were met with force. Now, I don't know if you know who Solzhenitsyn is. He's a Russian author of the 20th century, 19th to 20th century, 20th century mostly. And the PJ Media headline is Solzhenitsyn and Why Commies Can't Engineer Morality. And the point from this is we're going to go into the left's Overton window on morality. Now, as I mentioned previously before, my morality is tethered to scripture. Simply just for the simple reason is I don't let changing times tell me what morality should be, right? And it's not like I don't hate people in the LGBT community or people that have moral shortcomings or are sinners or whatever. I don't care. I love, I love humanity, hate people. But people's general behavior, if it's, you know, as long as they keep it on their side of the fence, what the fuck do I care? I'm a libertarian. But that doesn't mean my moral point of view changes. See, this is the problem with people that are immoral. If I even deign to consider to myself that they might be behaving immoral, they get all uppity about it. I can consider you whatever I consider you, right? I'm not going to offend you to your face. You know, everybody has their right to stay in their lane and live their lives and make their own way. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not a thumper, right? But you dare to criticize my moral thinking, and this has happened time and time again over abortion. I don't necessarily think abortion should be illegal, but my views on abortion are that it's immoral. It's barbaric as far as I'm concerned. That's the point. I can have a view on morality that doesn't really concern you unless I voice it, right? But if I entertain that morality, somehow you're offended. You know, this happened. I was talking to a neighbor once, and I said that very thing. I don't think abortion should be illegal, but I find it immoral. And she got up and walked away, like, oh my God. But again, many people have said you can't legislate morality. It's a difficult thing to do. In any case, next PJ article up is Greg Gutfeld just exposed exactly how the Democrat Party has lost its values, and I align morality with that. He went on to say, if you don't value your values enough to protect them, i.e., as far as I'm concerned with morality, the people you attract, the radicals, they value it and will take it over. And then they're talking about where the left is concerned, values and morality. So what Greg is talking about is that they will define your values for you.
If you don't value your values enough to protect them, the people you attract, the radicals, they value it and they will take over. It's why you see so many experiences that you go like, how did this happen? Like, how did we get Drag Queen Story Hour? How did do you ever think about that? Like, how did that happen? How is it that city blocks can be taken over?
Here. Hold on.
Or that we actually tolerated looting, or there's violence in subways.
Hold on. All right, just hold on a second here. This is the shit that bothers the piss out of me. It's like, for some reason, I'm in the middle of using an application, and another application throws up a window, and it fucks everything up for me. Hold on. Fucking A, man. All right, one more time here.
Will take over. It's why you see so many experiences that you go like, how did this happen? Like, how did we get Drag Queen Story Hour? Do you ever think about like how did that happen? How is it that city blocks can be taken over? Or that we actually tolerated looting, or there's violence in subways and airplanes, and felons are rarely incarcerated. This is what happens when you no longer fight for your values, because then the structure starts falling apart, because the people that are coming in convinced you, it scared you that the basic civil order is oppressive, and it's just better to concede the ground to them. If you look at these guys, though, this is why. So why is the energy there? It's because the DSA has the purest moral expression of the Democrats' progressive commitment. That's all it is. Anti-racism, economic justice, solidarity with the oppressed. And the Dems are so incoherent. What are their values? They don't talk about it anymore. So the party kind of welcomed these people because it gave them an edge. It was like a better version of them. But now you've got these skeptics like Carville going, whoa, 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 whoa. They are starting to realize that this charismatic force will harm you once the trust is secured. But by then it'll be too late. Right.
Yeah, there you had Greg Gutfeld talking.
If you don't value...
talking about the Democrats. And we're going to get into that in just a bit here. Talk about what I was gonna say, Margaret Cho, the comedian. No, that's not her. Let's just next go to this headline here, headline number 11 here from the National Review. The Socialists want the DNC to sign its own death warrant, which leads us to this story. The activists will only keep trying. The institutional Democratic Party is awake to its peril, but the hour is late indeed. 1/3 of all Democrats now identify as socialists. The party's most popular figures are Democratic socialists themselves. 3 out of 4 Democrat voters say they're willing to support a socialist candidate for the presidency, despite most of the general electorate's opposition to socialism and its champions. Most of the general electorate. So most of the people on the right don't even consider socialism, at least as an option, right? So that's the point, because most people know history, because it always starts out as, oh, we're going to have these socialists, right? And then there's a breakdown. And then because there's a societal breakdown, the forces of socialists have to clamp down, and then rises authoritarianism, and then the elections end, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on to the Federalist, the lawless zone in Madison is a preview of America under socialism indeed. To them, this is what socialism looks like, suspending the rule of law to ensure what their desired outcome is achieved. And that's what I was talking about before, with the fact that they have to bend themselves into authoritarianism, despotism, dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, because the socialism starts falling apart, and society starts falling apart. And if we just become more socialist or communist, then it'll all work out. Article number 13 from PJ Media. The left wanted another George Floyd. Madison got the facts instead. And what exactly are they talking about here? Madison activists reach a verdict before Wisconsin investigators finish gathering evidence. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump called Corey Ruiz's death an execution, while protesters demanded the arrest of the officer who fired. Now, if you didn't know what happened here, I'll just give you the rundown quickly. The preliminary police account tells a harder story. Officers responded July 26 to reports of a man stealing bicycles and checking vehicle doors. Police said Ruiz fled, struggled with four officers, pulled a fixed blade knife, and injured one officer, and then he was shot. So either story, he fled after stealing a bicycle. He fled, not running, but he fled on a stolen bicycle, then struggled with officers, then pulled a knife. Okay, where they were, they should all have body cameras so we would see exactly what happened. It doesn't matter. First of all, if you struggle with officers, resist arrest, you could be killed. They might use less than lethal force, which they did. They tased the guy. Apparently, it didn't affect him. And that's when the officer who was stabbed pulled a gun and shot him, and he died. Okay? You don't get to fight with law enforcement. This is some sort of the leftist. When I'm talking about morality here, I'm also talking a little bit about the law, even though legislation isn't morality. That's not how it's arrived. It's arrived at democratically, so it depends what the moral compass is necessarily of the legislatures or the people trying to pass the law. The point is here is that you're not allowed to fight with police, okay? You're just not allowed, right? You're a citizen, supposedly, a resident, whatever, of the jurisdiction, right? So if you're within the jurisdiction of the police can stop you, can detain you, can arrest you without charge, and you don't have any right to fight or flee. Okay? Right? There's no law that's saying, oh, well, if you're innocent, you could try to run away. Or if you're innocent, you could fight with police. That's not what the law is. The law is if you were detained by police, it's perfectly legal, and they could detain you, put you in cuffs, put you in the back of a police car, and detain you in most states for up to 24 hours without charge. Okay, if police witness you committing a crime, right, you're done. So the reason is you don't want to be arrested, charged, and convicted for the crime you just committed knowingly. So you try to get away, right? That could result in your death. So you could go to jail or you could possibly be killed. I would go to jail. But whatever, you know, if you're caught red-handed, and that's the thing with lawlessness, is like everybody thinks there's a way out. There's no way out. The law is the law. And if you're a Democrat, you should believe in the law because legislation is arrived at democratically, right? If you're an agent of chaos, a socialist, whatever, then you might not think so. Speaking of socialists, PJ Media, Hong chose Hassan Piker and Ilhan Omar. Wisconsin should notice. Wisconsin Democratic gubernatorial candidate Francesca Hong campaigned in Milwaukee on Sunday alongside Representative Ilhan Omar and political commentator Hassan Piker, two figures who have drawn criticism over anti-Semitic and anti-Israel comments. That's not the only criticism they face. They're fucking socialists. First of all, Ilhan Omar is really skirting the law with several things. A, apparently marrying her brother to get him in the country. That's illegal. And also hiding your wealth. Why would you hide your wealth? Well, because if all of a sudden in 1 year, you all of a sudden get $300 million and you quickly skirt it out of the country into Somalia, and then, oops, that was an accounting area. It wasn't $3 million or $30 million or whatever it was. It was $3 million, or it wasn't even $3 billion. It was $300,000. And by the way, it was $30,000 or $3,000 or whatever. These people are not, that's a problem with the left. And that's why the right has traditionally been law and order, because the people on the left are like, law and order, schmall and order. It's like, what? That's what society is based on, modern society in any case, based on. Piker has called Orthodox Jews inbred, and Hamas was 1,000 times better than Israel's government. Omar has accused Israel of genocide, and a congressional website promotes abolishing ICE. Of course, if you're an immigrant and your family has arrived here, we could say surreptitiously, I don't know, possibly not legally, of course you don't want ICE, abolish ICE. The more immigrants, and again, Red Green Alliance, this is a bunch of bullshit. We have laws. You don't like the law, repeal the law. You could do it democratically. But the problem is Democrats don't have a majority to change things. It's simple. They just don't have the majority. In elections, they have to fake it by manufacturing votes. Ballots, really. National Review Sewer Socialism, but worse, we're talking about Wisconsin, and that's the Wisconsin gubernatorial candidate, again, Francesca Hong. What is Sewer Socialism? Sewer Socialism was American socialist movement that centered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin from around 1892 to 1960. The moniker was coined by Morris Hillquit at the 1932 Milwaukee Convention of the Socialist Party of America and was intended as a pejorative, commenting on the Milwaukee Socialists and their perpetual boasting about excellent public sewer system in the city. However, it has since become synonymous with pragmatic socialist efforts of the Milwaukee Socialists of that era. It's the same thing about like the Nazi party and the trains always ran on time. It's, we have this good infrastructure because we milk the taxpayer or the wealthy. Going back to the Wikipedia article, with the creation of the Socialist Party of America, Sewer Socialists formed the core element of that favored reformism rather than revolution. Again, it's democratic socialism. Or Fabian socialism, de-emphasizing social theory and revolutionary rhetoric in favor of creating honest government and implementing social works to improve public health, the sewer system, or the trains or whatever. Look what we do with infrastructure. Those kind of socialists are long gone. Even though they call themselves the Democratic Socialists of America, they're not Fabian socialists. They don't work within the system to make lives better for working people. And as Greg Gutfeld pointed out, that kind of idea, and even the Democratic platform of the same idea, has been hijacked by revolutionary socialists, even though they still go under the banner of Democratic Socialists, working incrementally within the institutions and the system to change things better for working people. It's not what they're doing. If you listen to their rhetoric, it's angry, even from Ilhan Omar, and it's revolutionary in the case of Hassan Piker. Article number 17, just the news. Massachusetts bill legalizing abortion through whole pregnancy awaits governor's signature. Opponents call it extreme. The legislation that is on the desk of Democratic Governor Maura Healey. The extreme legislation that will force taxpayers to fund abortions even late in pregnancy, and proponents stating women seeking late-term abortions will no longer have to travel out of state. Oh, big deal if it's late term. Massachusetts' new abortion bill is very extreme, legalizing abortion on demand until birth, paid for by the taxpayer. Bill 5595, it's House bill, also calls the Prioritizing Parents' Access to Care Act. I love it. It's care. Mutilating and ripping a near-term fetus out of the womb is care, healthcare. The bill allows abortion through all 9 months for any reason based on a doctor's professional judgment. Under this law, the abortionist who profits financially from performing the abortion is the sole approver. Second and third trimester abortions are brutal and barbaric, generally done by dismembering the fetus, baby, or inducing labor. The latter may result in a live birth if the abortionist has not first delivered a lethal injection to the baby's heart, which many admit a lot of times they don't do that. And this is where Ralph Northam came into the fray, is that, if during the late-term abortion, if the baby is actually born and not dead, they just put it aside in a room and don't administer it care and let it die. Which again is barbaric. And that's my case for morality is, a chemical abortion, maybe early in your term, is certainly less barbaric. But just keep in mind, there are more abortions performed now, mostly chemically, more than ever before. So Roe versus Wade did little, except I think it was done purposefully because it was going to introduce the chemical abortion, which was pretty much shunned before the overturn of Roe versus Wade. In any case, going back to the Democratic Party, Zero Hedge, story number 18, the real reasons why funding for the Democratic Party is collapsing, is crumbling. The organization has around $16 million of cash on hand for campaign operations after debts are counted. The Republicans have $130 million. In the terms of super PAC money, the Democrats have $334 million to draw from, while Republicans have $1 billion. So we're talking about Arabella Advisors. Arabella went out of business, actually, because the Bill Gates Foundation cuts ties with Arabella because Arabella ceased operations in November 2025 due to investigations into dark money funding. Increasingly, Democrat coffers have suffered significant declines after Arabella dissolved and rebranded as Sunflower Services. The organization has had numerous overlapping ties to U.S. aid. And if you don't know the CIA's involvement, not just in U.S. aid, but in elections, even in this country, you should think again. And the point is, Act Blue is under the same investigations that Arabella Advisors was under for the donations from foreign entities and the CIA, et cetera. It should be noted that employee contributions from USA, the Department of Education, and other organizations targeted by DOGE cuts were around 95% Democrat. Huge swaths of the federal bureaucracy have long been run by the far left. Indeed, presidents come and go, but the bureaucracy is forever. And as we know this because, and that's why the Democrat Party is suffering financially, is specifically because it's the undermining of the deep state that took place with DOGE and the President Donald Trump's first and mostly second term. Much of the DNC's losses can be contributed to their own ideological unhinged leadership. Kamala Harris, for example, had nearly double the number of billionaire donors and corporate sponsors compared to Donald Trump, yet Trump won the election in a landslide, and the Harris camp ended up with $22 million in debt. Major donors, including Bob Harrigan and Reid Hoffman, have pulled back from the DNC after the 2024 disaster, citing lack of faith in leadership and questions over the purpose of the Democratic Party. Indeed. Finally, with the rise of the fanatical Democratic Socialists, candidates in blue city elections across the U.S., the Democrat Party is being treated as radioactive. The more the party doubles down on woke, the less people like to trust them. Get woke, go broke. And there's more because of the party platform of socialism. Zero Hedge again has 12 glaring realities of Marxist socialism. Story number 19. First, Marxism was founded on the stark concept of atheism. Second, Marxist policies encourage folks to be intellectually and physically lazy, indeed, because it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Third, Marxists are quite generous with the money confiscated from job creators, but they are stingy with their own money. Exactly. If you didn't know this at all, you'd find that they're bad with money. They love taking money, but when they spend money, they want to spend other people's money. They never want to spend their own money. Just the same thing with liberals. They always talk a good game, they virtue signal, but when it comes down to being compassionate with their money, they don't do it. Third, as I said, liberals are the worst tippers. The third, the Marxists are generous with, I did that already. Fourth, Marxist influencers compete with each other to see who's the best liar. Indeed, they're very dishonest as far as that's concerned. Fifth, Marxism is an arbitrary system built on the foundation of contradictions. If you didn't know this, it can hand out some goodies, but just as easily withdraw them. That's the whole point of the social credit score. It's used, they create dependency, and then they can withhold those goodies if you don't play ball or vote for them or whatever. Six, the ideology that claims it will usher in equality. Marxism certainly is fixated on economic, class, color, gender, and race. This is so true too, because the deal with this is they constantly, first of all, they talk about equity now. They don't want to talk about equality because they've abandoned equality, because to achieve equity, they have to uplift only certain races, classes, genders, etc., and disparage others to achieve this equity. So there's not equality at all, even though they talk about equality. Seventh, Marxists promise freedom and security for those who join their cause, yet wealth is stolen from others and security only exists for the top of the pyramid. Eighth, it's puzzling why Marxists who reside in free societies lack the courage to move to the autocratic societies they admire, like communist China. Ninth, Marxism promotes the darker facets of human nature rather than its nobler strivings. Again, abandoning or throwing out the baby with the bathwater, abandoning traditional values to invent new ways of thinking that usually are just old ways of thinking with a new facade. Tenth, Marxists never learn from history and thus are doomed to repeat it, even after the carnage that has been generated by their dystopian policies over a century. They keep promoting these same ideas, which have been proven to be false. And like I've said previously, that's the whole thing with postmodernism and critical theory, what have you. They're just reinventing Marxist ideas because it was evident by the really 1920s, 1930s already that the Bolshevik revolution wasn't working. Glorify the vices. 11th, Marxists glorify the vices and demonize traditional virtues. Already went over that. And finally, Marxism is highly immature. Marxists rarely learn from the past and thus triple down on failure. They blame others for their own fascist behavior, which is an example of denial and projection. They demand to get what other folks have earned, which is childish and immoral. Marxists side with totalitarian entities and mob rule while imposing the sole Middle East democracy, Israel. Most Marxists only embrace law enforcement when it's provided to protect unlawful immigrants and themselves. No, that's what they have their brown shirts for. What did I saw recently? I think, where was it? Minnesota, where they had a big Islam march or parade, and some racist dude, I forget the guy's name. He's always out there with body armor. He was holding up a sign and chanting at the parade, and the parade turned on him and his cohorts there who were filming and beat them up. What the fuck? You know, you can march, right? But someone can't stand there, and that's what American protest is. Stand on the sidewalk with your sign, shout your slogans. That's all you can do. You can't beat people up. Just don't. And that's all the Red-Green Alliance. And that happened actually to Nick Sorter too, when he went to that autonomous zone in Madison, Wisconsin. What is it called? It's not Chaz, it's called something else. In any case, he went there to report on it, and they threatened to kill him and beat him up if he didn't leave. And he's just an independent journalist. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative or liberal journalist, you're allowed to report on things in public. That's the Second Amendment, so they're not acting constitutionally. Moving on, though, with the news, story number 20, One American News, Mamdani renews $1.86 billion contract for hotels to double as homeless shelters. Most homeless have mental illness. And that mental illness usually leads to drug abuse, not vice versa. And why would you want the mentally ill in hotels? They need psychiatric help. Like I said, I believe prisons should have psychiatric wings, and these people should be arrested for vagrancy. Why not spend the 8-point-something billion, on expanding prisons? But that's so controversial. New York Post, Socialist Mamdani, I keep pronouncing his name, it's Mamdani, launches new war on NYC business leaders, kicking them off mayor's fund that backs city programs. If you didn't know what this was, he acts the advisors of a major nonprofit that channels private sector donations to fund city initiatives in his latest hostile act towards New York City businesses. You know why? Which is really stupid, because who do you think are the major donors to the city nonprofit? It's businesses. So the businesses want to be on the board that handles where their money goes. I'm sure it certainly is not going to go to housing homeless in hotels. Who knows, though? But that's the point, right? Is like, if it's your money, whether you donated it or not, if it's your money being spent, maybe you want to be on the board to make sure that your money is spent wisely. Moving on to next story here, PJ Media, story number 22. Nick Shirley's new video dismantles the left's narrative on Quetta's migrant crisis. Yeah, they're just friendly people. Nick Shirley once again finds himself in serious peril when a Muslim man chases him through the streets while wielding a knife and threatening to stab him. Sounds like Wisconsin. Post Millennial chimes in on the story. Armed African migrants chase journalist Nick Shirley in Quetta, Spain. Love this guy, man. I'm going to stab you. I love Nick Shirley. He is independent journalism's next hope. I mean, he really took after people like Nick Sorter and just go out on the ground and film. I mean, that's what I used to do. I mean, I had a staff job, but you can't find out the truth from sitting on the phone in the newsroom. You got to go there and figure it out. While walking through the streets of the city, located on the Strait of Gibraltar on the African continent, men started shouting at Shirley, "Come on, cut the camera," they shouted. "Fuck, come here." A glass bottle grabbed from the trash was thrown at Shirley, as well as rocks. A man began chasing Shirley, and a man accompanying him, Mansilla, yelling, "I'm going to stab the both of you," before pulling out a knife. This is what you get with the Red-Green Alliance. There's no rule of law. It's just chaos. Law is something to be skirted, and it's true. If there's no law enforcement there, the law itself isn't going to protect you. Only enforcement of the law protects you. And when you stop enforcing the law, what you get is chaos, period, right? Fox News story number 24, federal judge blocks New York law banning ICE agents from wearing masks. The court issued a preliminary injunction ruling New York likely cannot regulate how federal law enforcement agencies carry out federal operations. It's true. It's supremacy clause. I believe in the separation of, the states' rights. But when it comes to federal law enforcement enforcing federal law, not much you could do about it. You could get in their way, and you could obstruct, and you could resist arrest and do all those things. You could end up dead if you do that. Doesn't matter if you're a criminal or an alien or just an American citizen who's obstructing, you could die. Don't fuck with the police, period. And I'm not giving all police a pass. As some people say, he's a holster sniffer. Like, that's, I particularly don't like police because they always get up in your biz, right? But that's their right. If you're in public, that's your right. You know, if you're in your car or you're in your house, particularly, you have rights, right? And when those rights are violated, I don't take lightly to that, certainly. But if you're in the commission of a crime, you're allowed to be pulled over. You know, you're in the commission of a crime. Or you're not, or you're suspected of a crime, you're allowed to be pulled over, right? You know, and the cops have the right to dictate certain things of you and certain things they cannot do, right? You don't have to answer any questions. But you have to provide them with documentation. At least in most states. Next story up, 25. Headline number 25 from the Federalist. Politico said non-citizen voting was overblown. Now it admits the entire system runs on honor. Of course it does. Just like Maggie Brennan said, like, illegal aliens don't vote in federal elections. They're not allowed to. It's against the law. Oh, yes, the law again. Like I said, a law without enforcement is no law. You can't, you know, just because it's illegal doesn't mean people won't do it if they're not going to face repercussions. Politico didn't expose an open secret. It merely started reporting on the very same facts that Republicans had been citing all along. Election officials, so Matt Friedman with Politico said, election officials and campaign consultants from both parties believe the number of non-citizens being added to the voter rolls is significantly higher than 6,600, the governor of New Jersey, Cheryl, cited. Because the state had been automatically registering drivers since 2018, and her figure covers only June 23rd to June 2024. It's the honor system, of course, and it's meant to be so. The more registered voters, the more illicit ballots they can inject, period. It's cheating. It's a scam. It's a scheme. Fox News. ICE detainee who illegally re-entered U.S. after deportation dies at Delaney Hall. Edwin Lopez Cornejo was deported in 2006 before illegally re-entering the United States and being arrested in Plainfield, New Jersey in June. I don't fucking care. I don't care. You're not supposed to be here. It's the same thing with wrestling with police, right? If you wrestle with police, you wouldn't get shot and die. If you didn't come into the country illegally, you wouldn't have been detained at Delaney Hall and you wouldn't have died. And who knows what the reason is. Apparently, he was a young man. I don't fucking know. And I don't care. Shouldn't have been here. If you don't come to, and that's the problem. And his death is on Joe Biden's hands. Or not at Joe Biden, the AutoPen crew. You break the law, you face the consequences. Now, if someone's innocent, now this guy isn't innocent, obviously, because he's in the country illegally. If something happens to an innocent because of what the government did or did not do, and as a result of that, that's something else entirely. Speaking of the government, Associated Press authorities arrest arson suspect in connection with one of the devastating Spokane wildfires. Again, crazy leftists. I have a problem with this slide. This is weird. Crazy leftists. A 37-year-old man, Aaron Farinacci, was arrested and booked on suspicion of arson in connection with the Old Trails fire. What's new? Again, literal accelerationists. Starting fires. It's all leftist crazies. You have to understand a certain amount of morals involved in following the law. And as I said, I've fractured a law or two or many in my day, and still to this day. I speed, right? And sometimes I drink and drive. And sometimes I do other things and drive. No. That's not the point, is victimless crime. You know what I mean? If it's victimless, that's something else. And you say, well, illegal immigration is victimless crime. Illegal immigration, especially at that level, right, caused wages to go down, caused housing prices to go up, right? And not to mention the criminals that came in, right? They're obviously victims of those crimes. Ask Lake and Riley's family. I mean, there are thousands of instances. You shouldn't even go into that. I just want to chime in on this diarrhea causing parasite. Michigan reports the first 2 deaths related to this condition, cyclospora. Both people who died had underlying health conditions, and that's the problem. And were impacted by dehydration. And what happens with dehydration is it fucks up your imbalances your electrolytes, and that could cause serious heart problems. If the levels of potassium get too high compared to magnesium, and obviously sodium is usually not an issue because people get enough sodium in their diet. But I had a problem once, and it couldn't be diagnosed by any doctor. I went to brain doctors and everything because I was having seizures. Not one of them said, hey, your electrolytes are all fucked up. So I read on my own and found out, if you're are drinking a lot of alcohol, which is a diuretic, and your sunburn, which leaches magnesium out of your system. I did not know this. And if you're depleted in magnesium or your electrolytes are imbalanced, it could cause seizures. Started taking magnesium. Well, first I started drinking like Gatorade and stuff with the electrolyte balancing stuff, and that helped. And then I read this article, and then I started taking magnesium. Boop, went away. Thanks, doctor. So this is the problem with healthcare. Are they really working in your best interest? Hard to say. Just the news: Senate prepares for a contempt vote against Fauci as Florida Senator Rick Scott supports punishment. Rick Scott said on Monday on social media plans to hold Anthony Fauci accountable. Fauci appeared before the committee last week where he repeatedly exercised his Fifth Amendment rights instead of answering questions about his COVID-era journal entries. The journal appeared to show discrepancy between what he thought privately and what he said publicly. He caused the very pandemic he was supposed to be the hero of. Associated Press, story number 30, 25 states sue Trump over new tariffs, calling them pretext to replace his old ones. Of course they're replacing the old ones. After losing the Supreme Court, the administration is once again trying to illegally raise taxes on families and businesses with a new round of tariffs, said AG Letitia James. She is the biggest fucking idiot in the world. First of all, a tariff is a levy, but it's not a tax. And a tax isn't a levy. And a levy ain't a tax. A levy ain't a tax, but a tax is a levy. I forgot. I researched this before when they first started doing tariffs. The point is my state joined the lawsuit, which includes Maryland, Maine, Michigan, Massachusetts, Kentucky, Illinois, Hawaii, Delaware, Colorado, California, Arizona, all Democrat states. North Carolina, not a Democrat state. Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Virginia, Vermont, Washington, Wisconsin, all Democrat states except for North Carolina. But the point is that he's using a new Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, Section 301 against the unfair trade practices. So he's using a new thing. It's not a pretext to reinstate the old tariffs where the Supreme Court struck them down, I believe wrongly so, because they didn't like the fact that he was invoking the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, that he had to pay back all those tariffs that were a boon for the United States. And I don't know why the Supreme Court of the United States would do something against the United States. And it's just the way they viewed the Emergency Economic Powers Act, which I think, as Trump rightly stated, foreign countries were taking advantage of the United States and causing us a great economic harm. And so I think he rightly applied the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Last article here, I think, Zero Hedge. Article number 31, Senator urges national security review of Chinese solar companies' planned use of facility near U.S. military base in Ohio. The Chinese Communist Party is never allowed to purchase or lease land near our military installations. That's actually law. And so it shouldn't be granted. I don't like the fact that they allow, I'm not saying allow foreigners, but allowing particularly the Chinese, which are our enemy and have proven such. So, because they provenly spied on military installations and so forth and so on. So, of course, this should not be allowed. Whether it goes through or not is. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Weird. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, share the podcast, etc., etc., etc. You know the drill. No Tuesdays with Perry tonight. Tomorrow, maybe. I have another board meeting tonight. I got to deal with all this friggin' shit. You know, you have to put yourself in places of leadership where the leadership is lacking if no one else is willing to do that. So, I don't know what's happening. These it's technical difficulties, experiencing technical difficulties. The reality here is that I can't hear it. Yeah, it's a thing with OBS. You might have seen that update window pop up. I might update OBS again to see if it could change some of these hiccups I have with OBS. So, thanks again for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel. I'm here every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. or so, between 10 and 10:30, usually. Live streaming on X, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and BitChute. You can also find me on Substack, Truth Social, Instagram as well. Thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate you.
The New World Order.
These people are crazy.